The Matthew McConaughey clone who has gone to town as the real Matthew in the media is a good Loree McBride Jesuit cuck. All the Jesuit clone husbands say they're devoted fathers. It makes it appear that these children were conceived normally and not through rape. The fact is that evil Camilla used bomb rape on the real Matthew to conceive these children in order to sabotage his devotion to me. I hate what a man has to go through to be devoted to me. Satan really makes any real man pay dearly for adoring Jesus Christ's favorite, me, the King David woman. It's also disgusting that Jesuits create children solely to be used as weapons to destroy a true love relationship that they oppose. Loree McBride created Jackson Spiner in 2001 using semen stolen from the real Brent Spiner when she drug raped him with the support of Paramount Studios, who let her into the studio just to be able to rape Brent in order to destroy his love for me. Brent is #1 on my marriage list. And I only went to Vladimir Putin when I thought it was impossible for Brent to come to me after 9/11 2001, which happened mainly because Brent tried to board an airline at LAX, that's Los Angeles International Airport, that day to come marry me in Florida. When Vladimir was #1 and Brent went down to #2, Loree McBride wasted no time and used artificial insemination to impregnate herself so that Brent would be tied to her for good. We learned in 2011 that Brent Spiner had a clone. Jesuits have been using clones for a long time, though the practice of using clones became rampant in the 21st century. Loree McBride herself is a clone, and so is Camilla Alves. Clone DNA tends to be evil. It's created using fallen angel technology from the satanic UFOs, the fallen angel space fleet. When Vladimir was #1, Steven Spielberg made a Silver Skies movie based on my 1996 version of Silver Skies, and Matthew McConaughey got the lead role. That's when Matthew fell in love with me. Spielberg knew that making this movie would be a forbidden project because the Jesuits so opposed me because of my King David genetic profile. That's why the movie has not gone mainstream, even though it's won secret Academy Awards. I hadn't even written the Silver Skies ending, but what I had written was brilliant, so I guess that's why Spielberg wanted to make a movie out of it. I guess he supplied an ending. I tried to help him with an ending, but ended up botching my book because I wasn't really ready to write the ending. I knew I needed to do a lot more research before it would be ready. I'm currently working on the ending to Silver Skies, so I guess Spielberg's going to end up doing a remake. The Jesuits also found my Catherine the Great genes a threat. I've been targeted from my birth because Jesuits practice genetic profiling on all babies born all over the world and decide who they want to take down. I got on that list. I almost died my first month of life. Anyways, you won't get the truth about me or any famous man who loves me in the mainstream media and internet. It's all Loree McBride lies. Loree is the current leader of Satan's Jesuit order. I was able to lead the Jesuit order's previous leader, Zach Knight, to Jesus in 2016. When I led Zach Knight to Jesus, he was the Antichrist. Jesus told us he had Antichrist powers, which meant he couldn't be killed. The Antichrist cannot be killed until the final battle described as the Battle of Armageddon in Revelation. When Zach came over to Jesus' side, thanks to the King David woman, me, Loree McBride took his place. Satan has moved on and made Loree his new Antichrist. Loree currently cannot be killed because she has Antichrist powers. I'm very ashamed of Viggo Mortensen for defecting to her and making love to the Antichrist. I wish such a man was never on my marriage list. I believe eventually we will take Loree down as Antichrist, not sure how. And when that happens, Satan will again move on to make another person his Antichrist. Not sure how this will work since Satan originally gave his Antichrist powers to Zach Knight, that was February 2012 to 2016, who lost them to Angelina Ballerina. She had them from September 2016 to January 2017. And Zach took Angelina down in January 2017. Zach got his Antichrist powers back a bit after we defeated Angelina, but lost them to Loree McBride around spring 2017. I think Satan can only have one Antichrist at a time. Eventually, the person who will be the Antichrist depicted in Revelation and Daniel will come on the scene, and this person will be a man. Loree has had Antichrist powers from 2017 to now. It's no wonder Satan hates me so much. I was able to even lead his Antichrist to Jesus, and he hates anybody with influence who genuinely loves and supports me, like the real Brent Spiner, Vladimir Putin, Matthew McConaughey, Hugh Jackman, Judge Terrence Jenkins, Gerard Butler, Keanu Reeves, and a few others. I think the number of men on my marriage list has really dwindled, which is fine with me because it was never my idea to have a marriage list. But Jesuits just made my love life so complicated that it turned out that way. I actually consider myself a monogamous kind of woman. It really pissed off about 10,000 men. Geez, that's way too many. When I said I'd like to keep my sex to my husband, Brent Spiner, looks like those 10,000 have sold their souls to the devil right now. I get pretty disgusted when I hear what those Jesuits do to any man who genuinely loves me. They go to so much trouble to destroy that man's ability to love me, even impregnating their agents and creating children as weapons to serve the Jesuit order to destroy their targets, me and the men who truly love me. It's not easy to be in love with the King David woman. That takes a special kind of man, and those 10,000 who defected apparently were not special enough to deserve me. Out they go. Who do they think they are to demand that Jesus Christ favored give them sex? My, what nerve! I'm Satan's #1 target, and they don't care at all that by raping me they could kill me. All they care about is their lust, so that when they thought I wouldn't allow them to slobber over me like rabid dogs, they went to Loree McBride, who will give them what they want. Unadulterated lust. I bet if I had chosen the men for my marriage list, I would have kicked them all out. I trusted Brent to choose for me, and he tends to forget that not all men are as big and generous as he is. Just because he's willing to die for me, he thinks every man's that way. No, these men only wanted to die for lust. I now have a new requirement to any man who wants to be on my marriage list. They must read the Bible from cover to cover, and if not, off they go. I want a man who's more than a lust machine. Actually, I need to have a soulmate. And we mainly created the marriage list because my men are such a target, and my men wanted to be sure I'd have a husband replacement if Brent should be murdered. The marriage list was supposed to be for my security, not for me to have a harem. I've made it plain to these men that I prefer monogamy and only go along with the marriage list because Brent Spiner insisted, and the men assured me they understood about my devotion to Brent or whoever has the #1 spot. I've always encouraged them to find another woman who they can be more sure of actually marrying, but that if they're on my list, I'll strive to honor them as long as they're good men. I want a Song of Solomon type of lover, not a rabid sex maniac. Hey, don't forget, I'm the King David woman. Just read the Psalms to get a feel for my heart. I'm very much like King David. I'm literally half King David. But Jesus says I'm more like how David was when he was young, like how he was before he committed adultery with Bathsheba. You might say, well, King David was polygamous. Yes, and Jesus said it was cool with him. But I think Bathsheba was King David's favorite. I also believe that if David's life wasn't so complicated, he would have only had one wife. You might say, but Catherine the Great was polygamous too. Yes, and she too had a complicated life. But her favorite was definitely Potemkin, and it was her clone and not Catherine who made love to horses. Yes, cloning technology existed even back in the 1700s. That's UFO technology. The fallen angels have made clones for centuries, but now with technological advances, they can be more public about it. But they still control the mainstream media and lie and make it appear that clones are not rampant today because they can use them more effectively if people don't know of clones' existence. We King David folks are always such a target. Satan hates King David genes. Those are Jesus Christ genes, you know. Just think, when Jesus makes love to his bride, the church, that's kind of like polygamy in a way, though Jesus will make it pure and awesome. Love and sex are fine as long as nobody innocent gets hurt. Those 10,000 who defected to Loree McBride only wanted to make rabid love to me and had no concern about my welfare or the welfare of the top men on my marriage list. We determined that if I let them make love to me, they would have devastated my vagina and probably would have killed me. And they're mad at me because I don't think their violent rape of me is glorious. That kind of lovemaking is evil. Take those evil rapists off my marriage list. The mere fact that they defected to rapist and murderer Loree McBride shows you they haven't a clue about what real love is. Loree doesn't understand true love at all and thinks it's a fairy tale. That's because she can't see past her own evil, selfish heart and projects her evil onto others. It's really tragic what Satan and his followers do to people with clones. Like me, for instance. They killed my real husband around 1988 and gradually replaced him with a Jesuit clone, which explains why my husband seemed to get more evil by the year. In fact, he was so evil by 2001 that if I didn't divorce him, he would have murdered me. I had to leave the marriage to stay alive. You can marry a good person, and that person can be replaced with a clone. So not all divorces happen because you used poor judgment in choosing a partner. You can't control over what Jesuits might do to your spouse. They might murder your spouse and force you to live with their clone. This has been a favorite method of Jesuits to destroy their enemies, kill off their good spouse, and replace the spouse with a Jesuit clone. Jesuits learned a long time ago that if you can destroy a person's family and get their own family to turn against them, that's the most effective way to destroy a person. This is why I've written law to make it death penalty to create clones. Of course, if you use clones in such an underhanded way. You don't want the world to know how you're using clones. And so the mainstream Jesuit-controlled media lies and says that clones don't exist. You know, in the last video that I made, I neglected to mention that when God sent that 1994 Northridge earthquake, after I prayed and asked God to forgive me for making love to Brent Spiner through my letters, that the earthquake hit Hollywood. This was after Loree McBride's lawyers used Paramount Studios to send me that notice saying that I was forbidden to write or contact Brent Spiner anymore. It was actually more complicated because my husband got in. It happened because my Jesuit husband threatened Brent with bad publicity. He found out that I was writing Brent, and so they sent me that notice. It was all a complicated plot by the Jesuits to destroy the relationship I had with Brent Spiner at the time. And God sent an earthquake. I prayed for 3 hours asking Jesus to forgive me for having long distance love with Brent Spiner and that I was an adulteress, and I asked for his forgiveness. And then God sent an earthquake, the Northridge earthquake to Hollywood. And guess what? You don't hear this in the news, but the only people who died in that earthquake worked for Paramount Studios. The only Hollywood people, I mean. And then he sent another earthquake when I started divorcing my Jesuit husband. It was called the Ash Wednesday earthquake. This was in Seattle in 2001. The Ash Wednesday earthquake. Talk about God trying to drop a hint. And what was so strange about that earthquake? It caused devastating damage, but nobody died. And I was in Seattle, and I ran down the stairs during the earthquake, and I felt that I did all the wrong things because I'm a Floridian, and I was just also, when I lived in California and I got saved, I think Jesus sent me all the way out to California just to get saved under the ministry of Joe Bonacisi, who was such a good youth director that he ended up teaching youth ministries at Baptist Bible College in Springfield, Missouri. So that's really interesting too. So my life has been fascinating as the King David woman. And I also forgot to mention that when I was married to my ex and he was in the Coast Guard, we had a 1 in 130 chance of being stationed in Houston, Texas, which was Brent's hometown. And I got stationed in Brent's hometown with a 1 in 130 chance. So for 3 years of my life, I lived in Texas. I lived in the Clear Lake, Alvin. I lived in Alvin for a year, then we moved to Clear Lake. And I used to drive out to Southwest Houston to the Bel Air, Meyerland region to do research. So Jesus actually moved me out to Texas so that I could research my novel, Silver Skies, where Brent grew up. 1 in 130 chance of that happening. If you're going to claim that God isn't planning my life, then you're just as dumb as a bat, man.